Welcome to Minerva. Today we're going to be discussing the Tomar Horde. Now, first of all, I'd like to introduce my co-host Duncan.
Hello.
And we have a special guest today, Hamilton White.
Half of the Lost Relics crew.
So, we hope to give you enough information that you can go away and then do your own study. Today we're going to be talking about the Tomar Horde, and we are delighted to be joined by Hamilton, who is the owner of the Horde. But we're going to try and get into the nitty-gritty of this. So, what kicked it all off?
What, are you talking about me personally trading all the Horde stuff?
Well, the Horde stuff, what kicked off the interest in that?
Accident. The first piece that came to me, I didn't know what it was other than it was the Reliquary box, which I just thought was an absolutely fabulous piece of art. It came to me, I bought it, I looked at it for a few days, and on a total whim, I rang up the guy I'd had it from. He was in Portugal. And I've no idea why. I just said, look, hey, crikey, I'm going to be in Portugal at the weekend. Do you want to meet up? And he said yes. This was on a Wednesday, so I quickly bought myself an Easyjet out of Luton, and by Friday lunchtime, I was in Lisbon.
Wow.
That was it. Simple as that. I mean, I've never been to Portugal before. I'm under the age of 80 and I don't play golf, so I thought I was not allowed to go, but apparently I could. And from there, nearly 10 years later, we're now sitting on, 120, 130 fabulous pieces and a great story. Simple as that. It's really good.
That's incredible. Over 100 pieces of this stuff when previously Duncan, we talk about the Templar stuff quite a bit.
It always comes up in our conversations.
And there doesn't seem to be anything else. There isn't many relics and stuff from that period.
Well, that is the part. Were you actually interested in the Templar stuff? I know you said it was the Reliquary box that got you interested, but was there an interest in the Templars beforehand? Or did that spur from...
I've always been interested in the medieval period. I mean, for 30 years I've been collecting swords and armour, and I've always liked the sort of Viking early Crusader pieces.
Yeah.
So there's a crossover in interests. And at one point I did have an awful lot of swords.
That sounds so
Too
unhealthy.
many swords?
Yeah, I mean, at one point I had like 200 Viking and medieval, and I've cut down to about 60 now. I'm not doing it. I'm not over the top anymore. But it was my period, It was just a fascinating time in history. And this whole Templar thing just cropped up, and it sort of slots in with my interest. It's been a great adventure. That's all we can say about it.
I suppose that's, for me, would be the question in this case of when, from my side of being the cynical side, if somebody has a passion, sometimes that passion changes the perspective that you want it to be Templar.
Totally.
Then actually...
Yeah, I totally agree. There's so many delusional people who have convinced themselves of what they've got or what they're going to find, and it will be made to fit their narrative. That's a very common fault within a lot of sort of antiquities and history people's mindset. This was not really setting out to find anything at all. I mean, the Reliquary box came, I went to Portugal, and from that I went to Switzerland and various other places on this sort of chasing down some strange stories.
Yeah.
And really, for quite a while, it was more trying to convince yourself that, no, this is too ridiculous. Nothing Templar exists, there's nothing there. You can't actually be generating this volume and quantity. It doesn't make any sense. So you're actually trying to place it somewhere else. What are the other options on it? And by a process of elimination, well, I can't actually see anything else it can be.
And was that taken from the concept of location then? Because
I
must admit, that was the thing that was convincing for me. Because, again, being the same, as you say, there's so little of the stuff around.
There is, yeah.
And it's wonderful to hear the sense of that rationale of going...
Totally logic, yeah. I mean, I'm a very logical person. I mean, a lot of people are far more passionate and get all sort of emotional about it. I like logical things. It's problem solving. And it was slowly looking over the story over a period of years, going back into the history books and, well, what actually happened over in the Holy Land at sort of the end of the Crusader period. And yes, there are records of Templars shipping stuff out. There's records of things appearing in Cyprus. There's records of we don't know what, but in 1307, nothing was found in the treasury in Paris.
Yeah.
Well, something somewhere must exist. I think a lot of people look at Scotland to start with because of all of the legends of the Templars and the Rosslins and all of that. That's where everybody's leanings have always been. And I think quite possibly there's stuff there as well that hasn't been found. But then when you actually start going into the real history of, well, why Portugal? And you go back that, well, the Templars actually helped create Portugal. It was one of the few places in the world where the kings were still 100% loyal to them.
Yeah.
There's records of ships coming in end of October, November 1307. Tomar was the city, the Templar city, and the Templars were given almost a third of the land of Portugal by the Portuguese kings. So, well, okay, this is starting to make sense. But I mean, it wasn't a case of, oh, here's a chalice, that's definitely Templar. It took quite a few years before I convinced myself that,
Really?
I think genuinely it is. I mean, the gut feeling the first time I held the obsidian chalice,
Yeah.
I know what this is straight away within 10 seconds of picking it up.
Right.
But, right, okay, that's the thinking with your heart. But then 2 years later, you've done a load of running around the world, you've done your research properly, and you know what? Your brain actually is agreeing with you.
Really?
Yeah.
So just so I've got this right. So when you got something like the chalice, apology, the reliquary box.
Yep.
So you got that purely for an interest in the period and thing. And then, so like, how many items did you buy before you started thinking, hang on, I think I'm on a Templar Trail here?
And this is all coming from the same place as well.
It's all
trying to
emanating
piece that together.
from either the same source or traceable back to the same source.
Right.
And the initial story that I was told about, there was a find in 1960.
Yeah, I remember this.
Which was
said,
like,
yeah.
well, okay, right, it's before I'm born, so you're not going to go and find anybody who dug it up, obviously they're not here. So you're having stories second hand, so it's always more difficult to try and assimilate, well, what's being exaggerated, or is this another bad antique dealer's lie?
Yeah.
Which antique dealers do lie. They really do, they genuinely do. So you always sit there with a little element of caution as to, well, this is sort of coming together, but then when you actually get something part of the Horde that hasn't been cleaned, right, this is exactly as it came out of the ground in 1960, and you can now look at it with a bit more of an expert eye on it.
Yeah.
That, well, actually, you know what, this does look right for something that's been buried 400 or 500 years. Everything about it is right. The object is clearly genuine, there's no restoration on it.
Yeah.
Suddenly you can start putting more pieces into place that, well, you know what, the basis of that story, it does appear to be stacking up. And wherever I've been, when I've been chasing pieces, Switzerland or over here, there's never been another story. It's always traced back to an initial find in 1960 in Tomar, and it was then split up and moved around.
Because when we talk about this at some point, because it's like... we say dig up, but it's one thing we talked about grave robbing.
Yes.
Was it because wasn't there a story? I don't know. It's either we've discussed it or we've read it somewhere about where the Horde was. Because sometimes it could be interpreted as
how the initial find was made.
Yeah, or even where it is. Was it stuff like it was buried treasure, or was it relics that were buried with? Because I kind of like the grave story, to be honest.
Well, the story that seems to constantly reoccur, going back to when it was found in 1960, Portugal at that time, like the rest of Europe, was very, not backward, but it's the poor man of Europe, it always has been. And archaeology, totally unregulated in those days, right across Europe, everybody just went and dug wherever they wanted to dig. I mean, it was as simple as that, you just went out and you did it, there were no rules. Tomar, although it's now famous as being the Templar city, it was actually a very important Roman city going back a century or so before the Templar period.
Right.
And it was like one of the outpost cities of the Roman Empire, almost as far as you got in Portugal before the world ended. So it was quite a significant Roman provincial city. And as such, it was rightly assumed that there would be a Roman graveyard.
Right.
Because it wasn't a village, it was a proper settlement. And the burial traditions at that period, if you were sort of middle class or upper class Roman, you were buried with your jewellery, you were buried with gold, with ornaments, with the burial traditions pre-Christian, you were buried with artefacts. So, it's what happened all over Europe. Roman graveyards were dug up. It's still happening with the tomb robbers in Italy, because an undisturbed grave, gold and silver, would be perfectly preserved. 3 guys we don't know how old they were, but we're assuming they're in their sort of mid-20s at the time, had decided to go and try and find the Roman graveyard in Tomar.
Okay. Yeah.
Because nobody knew where it was, no archaeology had ever been done in the town. They went digging on the site where they thought the Roman graveyard would be, because logic tells you that you built towns on a hill as a fortification.
Yeah.
So you would go to the area nearest the hill because that's probably where the first settlement was. It wasn't. The actual settlement was lower down on the other side of the river, but this wasn't found out until in the 1970s. So these guys digging for the Roman graveyard, quite by accident, hit somewhere about a mile away from where they should have been digging, which hit this pot of 25, 30 items in two separate little caches, totally by accident. And what we believe happened is, particularly on the larger of the obsidian chalices, we're pretty sure that was inlaid in gold. And I think, sadly, they didn't recognise what they found, so they levered out the gold, which was the actual thing of value. And then the rest of the stonework and what we now look at today as phenomenally important, go back to 1960, it was junk. It had no value. Nobody was interested in it.
Yeah.
They had no interest in the history. All they were trying to find was Roman graves with gold and silver in it.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much dismissed as nothing.
I mean, taking the story now back to the people that buried this stuff.
Yeah.
One thing that I love about the Tomar connection is that it's so close to La Rochelle, in the sense of, if we are going down this Templar story, which we've spoken about so many times, that the fleet leaves La Rochelle, it's so close. It's really just,
It's a couple of weeks sailing at the most.
Yeah, it's just down the coast, isn't it?
Yeah.
Essentially.
Well, they've got records existent in Portugal of, we know the fleet left La Rochelle mid-October.
Yeah.
And there are records of Templar ships arriving about 10, 14 days later and coming into the River Tagus. Now, coming in from the Atlantic, you would come into the Tagus, then you sail inland up into the Nabeo, which takes you up into Tomar. But there's also some very long-standing rumours, now I don't know if it's written or just purely oral, that these ships stopped on the coast and unloaded and met some Templars from Tomar and unloaded the ships before they then sailed down into the Tagus and up through Lisbon, just on the off chance that they were going to be stopped.
Ooh.
And that's an oral tradition that comes from the area, and it's an obscure little fishing village that I never remember the name of.
That's just frustrating.
On what's now the Silver Coast.
Yeah.
And that's the legend that's been there for sort of 700-800 years, that's how the Templar treasure ended up in Tomar.
Brilliant. Okay, so one question I've been dying to ask you is, when we talk about the story of the Knights Templar, we talk about them having treasures from King Solomon's Temple and lots of other places like that. Do you think any of that might be held up or part of your hoard?
We're getting into a difficult area here, because there is one item that's been held back.
Okay.
That we haven't shown or told anybody about, just because the timing wasn't right. But being a bit ambiguous, I would say there are evidential things that might change people's perception on what they had.
Right.
Oh, that's just unfair.
Well,
sorry, I know I'm being difficult, but this has been hidden for many years, waiting for the right timing of it to then kind of go, well, actually, you've seen all of those chalices and you've heard all this story. There is something else.
Well, I know you well enough to know not to dig much deeper than that. Certainly not on camera, but
yeah, off camera's fine.
Off camera we can talk about.
Off camera's cool.
However, look, let's go back to the original stuff that you were trying to piece together at some point. Because you've got over 100 pieces. How long did it take you to collect all of those?
It's coming up to, I think we're either 9 or 10 years now I've been on this.
Okay.
Something like that. I forget. Time just flies.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrendous. You listen to music on the radio and you think, oh, that's been out a few years. Oh, no, actually, Def Leppard bought Hysteria out 30 years ago.
That's not getting scary for all of us at beers over the table.
So time does fly, and you think, well, God, 10 years of my entire life has been chasing this stuff down. It's time to sort of try and speed it up a bit and get some kind of conclusion out of it now, because it really is just, it's taking over.
How do you chase it down? I mean, because I can understand people coming to you. I mean, that's the other fear that I think I would have, is case somebody comes up to you, look, I've got this. I love the idea when you tell me like, this is stuff we're chasing down. What kind of leads do you have to chase down?
Well, I mean, going back to the beginning of it, when I was first going out to Portugal and first being told about this, the only real information I'd got was a Swiss guy bought a load of these stuff that was found in 1960 and it went to Switzerland. Mm-hmm. And pretty much that was all I was told at the time. But, you know, we operate in a relatively small world, people like me. And it's not impossible to track down who was actually operating in the 60s in Switzerland.
Right.
I know a few people out there and I know who I can ask questions of. And it's just the nature of the game. You know, I spent a lot of time years previous in Eastern Europe when I was looking for weaponry and general antiquities.
Yeah.
You meet somebody, you do a bit of business, they take you to somebody further up in the food chain who's got stuff they can't afford, but they introduce you, and if you don't mess about, it's great. You know, you get a call, you get on the plane, you go with a bag of money, and you do some good business. It really is as simple as that. Yeah. You know, providing you're perceived as being sensible. They don't want somebody who's showing up, spends 2 days talking, and picks 2 or 3 things out of 30.
Yeah.
But if you've been seen, the first few times you go, buy everything they offer you, even if they don't want it, if you don't want it. But you're buying credibility. Once you've spent money, then the things that are under the table then start to come out, because you're seen as being serious at what you're doing. And you might have to buy 50 pieces of junk before suddenly the doors then open and, now we're in business here. And it works. And very much chasing some of the Templar stuff down through the Swiss contacts, and actually getting to the point where I found the guy who had got the big obsidian chalice, who had had it about 10, 15 years, and he'd got it from the person that actually was the person who got it from Tomar in the 60s.
Yeah.
Like, we've done it. It all stacks up.
Wow.
We've tracked it all the way back. And having to go to Zurich 3 or 4 times before I eventually met him. And go back to the apartment. There it is, it's sat on top of the telly.
Holding the area up with the old-fashioned way.
What I've been told about that may or may not exist, that I've been chasing that could have been a wild goose chase, finally, it's there. It's 15 foot away from me, it's sat on top of the telly. Right, I ain't leaving this building till I've bought that.
Really?
Simple as that. I am not.
And that's the collector's drive.
It's it was probably the one thing that suddenly made me realise this whole thing is factually correct. Right. Because that chalice hasn't been seen since the 60s. All these stories about Swiss people coming and going. Well, it's true. It's been through 3 Swiss hands. It's still in Switzerland, and it is a large obsidian chalice that's been broken when it was found. That's it. Box ticked. Got it.
That's incredible.
You do realise that now flying by Easyjet, and everyone says, well, it's got a bag of money, I recognise it from TV. So, I mean, you are quite notable now in how you look, how the hat, the TV presentation. I'm sorry, if I'll be sitting there, that brown bag, it's the brown bag, it's got the money in it.
Fly by Easyjet, you could probably have it sellotaped to your face, nobody knows.
At least you get by the weight restrictions.
Exactly.
Blank, if you've ever used Luton Airport, honestly, you could push it through customs in the wheelbarrow and nobody. Honestly, just a total blank expression of nothing, honestly.
So, look, you've
got to bring us back.
I've got to put order to this.
Sorry, audience. Yeah.
Look, one of the things that, that's so fascinating about this, and when somebody comes out and says, look, I've got this Knights Templar Horde, instantly there's going to be naysayers, there's going to be people that say, oh, it's all rubbish. One of the things that has really, really made me believe in this as a horde is the fact that there are so many different pieces that are all so different.
Correct.
And if you were going to fake it, you'd have to be pretty bloody good to be able to do stonework, reliquary boxes, obsidian chalices, and lots of other things.
And architectural pieces like the thing we've got on the table there. which appears to be some form of little altar of some kind.
Yeah.
You know, it's obviously been cut out of a building, be it a commandery, a castle, whatever it is. We don't know. But I mean, it's been deliberately removed from the building and it's been preserved.
Yep.
It's not been smashed to pieces. Somebody, and it's happened with so much of the stonework, it's been carefully removed for a purpose.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of the stuff, there's a little group of pieces that are fabulous, still with original 12th century polychrome paint on it, that came from the Templar commandery at Evora, which, again, totally different story altogether. Going back to about the 1860s, 1870s, a wealthy family within Evora decided that they were going to use some of their family money to build a new hospital for the town.
Right.
Now, Evora was a Templar town going back 700 years earlier. When they started digging the foundations to build the new hospital, they opened up a complete chamber, which was the site of where the Templar commandery was. And downstairs, it revealed a whole load of little carvings, all in original polychrome because it had been sealed up 700-800 years.
That's incredible.
And those pieces have all come to me. There's 5 or 6 pieces.
Wow.
And we know where they're from. We know the family who dug them out in the 1870s. Everything stacks up.
Do you think there's much more out there? Because so, I mean, you know, there isn't a list of this stuff, right?
Recently, 2 very good pieces came to me. Templar pieces, not from the Tomar Horde, but they've emanated from Salazar, who was the Portuguese dictator.
Yep.
Totally unknown, but he had an enormous collection of art that was dissipated before he died. Pretty much it's all been hidden away. Various families are known to have some cracking paintings and things. And 2 Templar pieces have come out of Salazar's collection. Does it mean there's still some more hidden away? Don't know. Be fantastic if it was.
Are you still chasing it?
I've got to go back to see, hopefully I'm going to be introduced to the last remaining family member and actually have it explained to me, how did this stuff come into our family, what else have you got, what are the circumstances. At the moment I've just got the 2 most important pieces, which are 2 fabulous chalices. I mean, really lovely, lovely things. And the story stacks up. Salazar had a wonderful collection of art, he gave it all away. A group of families seem to have acquired pieces from Salazar, and a lot of them still have them hidden away. As and when I get introduced to the elderly guy who's the end of the line in the family, I'll know more. But it was a fascinating place to go to. I mean, a sort of tumble-down farmhouse. Nothing special to look at, but you go in, there's suits of armour, there's tiger skins all rotting away, there's guns on the wall. All things that really shouldn't be in a sort of self-sufficient farmhouse, but because the family were connected to Salazar going 50, 60 years ago, all of these things have been in the family. Well, there they are, I've seen them, you know, it's fantastic.
Wow.
I mean, going back to that credibility side that we were talking about as well, one of the things that really rang true with me was that you've been at this for a long time, and this Horde hasn't, you know, it wasn't like as soon as you found the stuff, it came into the public knowledge. I was made aware of this quite a long time ago.
Through Tim.
Through Tim Wallace-Murphy.
Yeah.
I was having conversations with him about lots of things. And he happened to say, I'm coming to England soon. Hopefully we can meet up. And I'm coming to see a guy who's got some swords.
Yeah, that'd be me.
And that was
it. Well, the thing was, I took some fairly heavyweight legal advice on this when I'd only got 3 or 4 pieces, because I realised, you know, this is heavyweight.
Could be special, yeah.
And it was right, you shut up. You keep this completely below the radar. You do the research yourself. You don't broadcast it. There are no pictures to go out on the internet. You don't pass pictures around until you're absolutely confident in what you've got. However long it takes, shut up. So it was 5-6 years of total silence, working behind the scenes, still pulling more pieces in until, well, okay, we're ready to start talking now.
Amazing.
Has anything that you've purchased proven not to be? Have you ever come across something or been presented something that you thought, actually, that's not authentic or that's not part of the Horde? Is there anything that's been...
There's plenty of pieces of stonework that are completely genuine, but not part of the actual Tomar Horde find from Tomar.
Right.
But like that piece there, and like the pieces from Evora, from other Templar commanderies or other Templar properties, that they've been deliberately concealed or they've been deliberately preserved for some reason.
Right.
That they're totally genuine, they're all part of the same Templar period, the same package, but you can't turn around and say, well, that's Tomar Horde find. They're not. Some are from Evora, there's pieces from down in the Alentejo,
Right.
but they're all genuine Templar pieces. I can't think of anything offhand that has flagged up as being, don't like it. Not yet, anyway.
But I suppose that's because of the route you go down, not necessarily.
Yes, I mean, probably there is stuff floating around. I mean, there probably are other carvings around that you could try and tenuously try and attach to a Templar attribution somewhere down the line. But the stuff that sort of found its way to me, no, there's nothing that would concern me, really.
Right.
I mean, I think one of the fascinating things about this is the story behind it. But the relics and the individual items speak for themselves. So that's going to be what we talk about in our next episode. This is going to be a series of episodes that we're filming with Hamilton. So thank you for watching today. Please do like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next episode.